Okay, it's evening here and we're back recording, and I've done some electric bass videos today, and I wanted to do one more. One of my grad students had a great lesson this week, and we got to talking about 8-note scales, octatonic scales. I don't mean bebop scales, but I mean the usual half whole, whole half scales, diminished, auxiliary, sometimes they're called. I gave him some information about potential ways of fingering them. In general, I think it's always best to start with vertical scales and then go over to horizontal. So for the purposes of this video, I'm going to talk about only the vertical. So just to reiterate or to recap what I've said before, we have the idea of a duple fingering as being a very natural, organic way of playing a major scale in a one-octave unit. So for example, the A major scale, I could play starting with A there with my first finger, simply 2 notes per position. And the basic rule is you're playing off, everything is going to be played off first finger, not off 2/4 like some people think that way, or we're playing that way, but I'm going to recommend just everything off 1. So whole steps are going to be either 1/4 or 1/3. Half steps are going to be 1/2. And you, even at the end of the scale, do it that way for consistency when you play faster, and in particular when you sequence the shape up to different parts of the scale. So briefly, the A major scale, 1/2. And then once you can do that in all keys, the E flat scale, the C scale, so on and so forth, then you want to be able to do the given scale not just from the root, but from every other degree of the scale. So you want to be able to go not only from A to A, which is what we just did, A up to that A, you want to be able to go from G sharp to G sharp, from B to B, from C sharp to C sharp. And the way that will look will be, you'll start everything with the same rules, 1 and 3 or 1 and 4 for a whole step, and 1/2 for a half. So a couple of positions of the A major scale. Oops, I messed up. This is as high as you can go. Now let's look at the octatonic scale. As its name indicates, it's an 8-note scale. So when we added a 9th note, we had the 9th note to get the octave. So if we're going to do 1-octave units, the rhythm would have to change. So we would have to, since we're 9 notes, we'd have to be 9/8 meter, which is normally divided in 3. So for example, if I were just playing the scale, I'm not even going to fool you with fingerings, I'm just going to play the same note. Those are the sounds. So basically, you could feel it as triplets. Now what I'm going to suggest is it's better to not do a 1-octave unit when you practice this, and practice it as an 8-note group, just like you did with the major scale. So basically now I'm doing the G sharp diminished scale. So the pitches are G sharp, A sharp, B, C sharp, D, E, F, and G. Of course, G sharp would be on top. I could play that with my 4th finger. There's several ways I could do it, but you're going to get into a better groove with it if you just keep it as a duple pattern. So you'll still be in 4/4, and now your sound will be very similar to major, only you'll be doing a major or minor 7th as the span of the shape. So that's going to sound like this. And it's actually, of course, hence the name, totally symmetrical. So basically, the first position, you're playing all major seconds. And your shift is what I would call a minor 3rd shift. You're shifting from G sharp to B. Of course, it's a half step to the next note. So repeat that top note because it reinforces what you're going to be doing when you're improvising. Then the next position is going to be semitones, separated by again a minor 3rd shift, but of course it feels like a whole step. So that's how I would first go about just the matter of learning the roadmap of where those scales are. Figure it out in context. You can realize that they're built on either dominant seventh chords or diminished chords, and put it into context. But just to realize that if you played a G7, that scale we just played would work really well starting in the flat 9. And now you're starting on the sharp 9. Third and so forth. Then the other scale to be considered in the same way is the whole tone scale. Now with the whole tone, because you've got 6 notes in the scale, you add that octave again, you've got 7 4 time you're dealing with. It's going to make more sense to play this in 3/4 meter. So that's going to sound like this. If I'm doing a whole tone scale from there, the full octave would be one finger fingering. So you can hear that's 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 3, or maybe it's 1 2 3 1 2 1 2, but it's 7. It's 7 4. So instead make it 6, and you're just going a minor 7 span. So now you're saying, so I'm feeling it 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3, and you could also feel it 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. So basically that's how you get used to the symmetric scales, and I sort of had an epiphany today. I never really stated it directly this way to a student before. Don't think about it as 1 octave units. That's a drag. That'll hang you up. After you get comfortable with it this way, then of course you can make it conform to a 1 octave unit, which is really beautiful too. With those octatonic scales, you can look at playing 3 notes per position. So briefly, so you're putting together basically a 1 3 4 pattern or a 1 2 4 pattern, and now you have 3 positions, and you can. So that would be the next way to work it. So this goes out particularly to my one student yesterday, Jonathan, but really to everybody else. That as you're comfortable, you can start to incorporate that in your playing. And we know those 2 symmetric scales, the octatonic and the whole tone, are the key building blocks for completing your basic level of jazz improvisation, with the modes of the major scale, the modes of the melodic minor scale, the harmonic minor scale, and then the 2 symmetric scales. So you got 5 different basic options. At least that's how I would sell it to you. So that's it for now. Send me an email if you have any questions, and happy practicing.